young people are just curious by nature. And
hmm
so they may not even be looking for egregious content. At the very first workshop that we ever did, this
Right.
mom told us about a kid who was looking for dog pictures because she was writing a story about or a report about dogs. And she Googled fat dogs. Okay, this is a curious
Oh,
kid. She's like,
that's innocent.
yeah, what's the big deal? I Googled fluffy dogs, I got pictures. But that search returned a page of male genitalia. And that little 11-year-old girl was not prepared for that, nor did she go looking for something
Oh,
like that.
it's like giving them a loaded gun with no safety on it and just and say, just be careful, just be careful.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. And so therefore I tell my kids all the time, or my oldest one, I almost want to apologize to him and say, I should have never put that much responsibility in your hands. And it's not that I don't trust you, I don't trust this.
Right.
Hey, sweet friends, this is Toni Stockton with Standing Firm. I am so excited to have this next guest on. Her name is Sarah Siegand, and I'm going to introduce her to you because she has an amazing ministry called Parents Who Fight. Today, mommies and daddies, we're going to be talking about technology. Um, is there really such a thing as protecting your kids through parental controls? My goodness, I could talk about that. But I wanted to welcome her on today. She's going to really give you a brief introduction of her ministry. Her and her husband are actually in this ministry together. And if ever we needed to fight for the hearts and minds of our children by way of technology and understanding what's going on, the time and the hour is now. So I want to welcome my sweet friend, Sarah Siegand with Parents Who Fight. Welcome, sister.
Thank you, Toni. It's great to be with you.
I'm glad we were able to do this. We've tried to get on the podcast several times, and it was just a no go. But
Yeah.
today we made it happen.
Yes. We're
So,
here.
listen, for those who don't know much about your ministry, can you give us just a brief introduction of Parents Who Fight, why you started Parents Who Fight, and how you can help parents?
Yeah, so we actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary as an organization. 27 years of marriage, so we were, fully in before we started this, but we had our kids in elementary school and just started seeing and hearing some really troubling things. And it was like,
Right.
oh my gosh, these kids are being exposed to things that are really inappropriate. And as we just started asking parents around, like, does your kid come across this stuff? And realizing, oh gosh, this is a big problem. And I didn't feel
Mm,
like any tech genius, like I could
right.
solve it. I knew a few things because we were trying to be low tech and have a very protected experience in our home.
hmm
But as we prayed about it, we just felt like the Lord was saying that we needed to step in and do something about it and it help equip and encourage parents. So 10 years ago, we had a very small meeting with the parents from our school.
Wow.
And we were really just starting off like, let's protect kids from pornography. Everyone
hmm
can agree there. And that was the issue that was surfacing at our kids' elementary school. So that's where we started. We just wanted to give them some quick ideas of like, here are some things you can do to lock doors. And at that
hmm
point, it was a lot about the technology, like using Google Safe Search, things like that. And as we started putting our toe in the water, we started getting more invitations to talk about all kinds of things. So now, after 10 years, it's like we have seen the fully orbed problem as
Right.
well as a lot more solutions. I've heard a couple of other advocates say that at the beginning, we were trying to convince people that there was a problem.
Mm.
And now we're trying to convince people that there's a solution.
Oh,
Uh,
I love that.
and so, we start off here just in Nashville trying to equip our schools and our churches. And as our kids have grown and, our influence has grown, we've had opportunities to go elsewhere. As believers, we really want to make sure that, parents understand sort of the biblical mandate for us to protect our kids. And
Absolutely.
to be leading this fight. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about what we do. We do workshops and consultations and all that, but we're
Well,
here to
I
parent.
wanted to have you on the podcast because I had never heard of parents who fight. And honestly, I want this podcast to be extremely vulnerable, and I'm going to be vulnerable for my audience. I wish I had known about you, Sarah, you and Jesse. It's Jesse, right?
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
husband. I wish I'd known about your ministry when we gave our first phone to our oldest son, who's now in college. He's 19, almost 20. And I heard about you through Alan Jackson's podcast, Culture and Christianity.
Hmm.
I never heard of sweet Sarah Siegand and your ministry. And I think you said something on his podcast that I think is worth saying again. And you said that a lot of parents think they have their hands wrapped around this beast of technology. They've got the parental controls on there, but here's the kicker: my son or daughter would never go past those firewalls. My son or daughter, they're not going to do that. I
Mm.
trust them. And when I met with you for coffee, when you and I reached out and I said,
Mm.
I want to know more about this ministry and I want to know more about you, and your heart and your passion just came across for the love of these kids. But you said something that really stuck with me, and I told my husband, it's not that I'm doubting my child, but the dangers in this phone, the
Mm.
dangers that have now we've put in the hands of these kids. And it's we've and I know people say this a lot. It's like giving them a loaded gun with no safety on it, and just and say, just be careful, just be careful.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. And so therefore I tell my kids all the time, or my oldest one, I almost want to apologize to him and say, I should have never put that much responsibility in your hands. And it's not that I don't trust you, I don't trust this.
Right.
My goodness, can we speak to that?
Yeah. I think when our generation, which I know you and I are squarely Gen X,
Yeah,
um, when we started using this kind of technology, it was purely functional, right?
right,
There was not an app store at the beginning, there were not algorithms. And
right,
so our generation tends to be very practical. We're not looking for, oh, like, what's the new way that I can do this? We have a little bit of discomfort when, like, the interface of an app changes and we have to, like, figure out where the thing is. But young people are just curious by nature. And
hmm,
so they may not even be looking for egregious content. They
right,
may not have the intention of finding something that would change their life. They may just be curiously searching, curiously looking up something. At the very first workshop that we ever did, this
right.
mom told us about a kid who was looking for dog pictures because she was writing a story about, or a report about dogs. And she Googled fat dogs. Okay, this is a curious
Oh,
kid. She's like,
that's innocent.
yeah, what's the big deal? I Googled fluffy dogs, I got pictures. But that search returned a page of male genitalia. And that little 11-year-old girl was not prepared for that, nor did she go looking for something
Oh,
like that.
right,
So, these are the things that we're up against. Is the internet is made up of a million things, and there are people on the internet who are, trying to harm our kids or don't care if they're harmed. That's why things like
absolutely.
coloring book apps can have a 4+ rating in the app store, but have ads in them that link you to porn
To
sites.
porn sites.
Right. So, kids think that something is innocent because they just don't have the vast understanding of how it could go wrong. And that's why when we give them, internet based technology to hold in their hand and go every which way with them wherever they go,
Right.
it's really not a safe situation. And their brains are so impacted by it. That's been a big thing that we've really started focusing on in the last few years, because, of course, we have older kids now.
Hmm.
Our oldest is in college, and our youngest is getting ready to graduate from high school. And we waited a lot longer than their classmates to give them phones and social media. My
So
youngest doesn't
good.
have social media yet,
Hmm.
but he is starting to even believe us about the way it's impacting their brain.
So, Sarah, we're talking about the effects that pornography has on our children. And it can be our children can stumble upon pornography very, very innocently. And again, this podcast is going to be extremely transparent. I've always promised my audience that. And talk to us about what it does to the brain. We know what it does emotionally, uh,
Mhm.
spiritually, all those different things. But what does it actually do to the brain of a young person when they're pulled into such a dark place like that?
Well, the pornography industry is huge, vast, and they have figured out how to hack into the biology of their users. And so the
Wow.
content has only become more and more shocking over the years, such that I probably couldn't even read to you from a front page of a pornography website without it feeling like we've really violated people's ears.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and if anybody is really wondering what kinds of things are out there, I would encourage you to read Lila Mickelwait's book, Takedown, which is a real life account of her trying to take down the largest pornographer in the world. Um,
Okay, okay.
but because that content is so shocking, it doesn't even have to be something that the kid has gone looking for, but it
Right.
does something in their brain that
Mm-hmm.
releases, a surge of hormones and chemicals of like, what is that? Am I allowed to see that? The dopamine that makes them come back, it's like the high has to keep
Right.
getting higher.
Mm-hmm.
And, when a 10-year-old, I mean, I can't tell you how many families have contacted us where their 10-year-olds, have encountered pornography. And when the parents look back at the history, they are like, I'm sick to my stomach that my daughter has seen this, my son has seen this.
Mm,
And to help the kids understand, it's like you are not going to be able to, in your own brain, if you keep looking at it, you're not going to be able to really interrupt that. You don't have
right.
the brain maturity to do that. So having a plan with your kids right from the beginning, as soon as they're on any kind of technology, of as soon as they see something that is inappropriate, confusing, scary,
Mhm.
look away. Like
And you know
that
what?
look is so important.
Absolutely. Sarah, I had this thought I remember when you and I were talking and this was when I heard you say this, because having an older teenager or just talking to other families that are Christian,
Mm-hmm.
keyword, it doesn't mean you're a bad
Yes.
Christian. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that you don't love the Lord, that you're not walking with the Lord. Because you said, there's so many chemicals in the brain, the
Mm-hmm.
dopamine hits that are happening, the addiction that's starting to lay a foundation in this person. Gosh, can we? I really just kind of want to stay there a minute because I think people feel bad that they can't break this on their own. And I listen. I know the power of the Holy Spirit. I know the Holy Spirit can do anything. Um, but when you said that about the dopamine hits and how many people actually innocently see an image or they get directed to a porn site. Oh my goodness, I think here recently we had the Mattel doll. I talked about that from
Right.
Wicked.
Yep.
They said it was an oversight. Don't know if I believe that. Where they had a porn site on the back of a child's toy, and so it's everywhere. But can we talk to that person who's walking in condemnation and they don't need to?
Yeah.
I know
I
you have
mean,
a lot to say about that.
well, first of all, even just for the parents, I
Okay.
think parents also suffer from the shame of
Yes.
this happened to my kid. I
Yeah.
I am a I'm either a bad parent or everyone's going to think I'm a bad parent, but I can tell you, I
Yeah.
mean, we've had amazing people reach out to us for help who are pastors,
Yeah.
who are so godly and they have such good boundaries in their home, but something got through with a cousin or something at school. So, I think the first thing for parents that I want them to hear is, you have to realize that the experiences that your kids are having on
Mhm.
the internet are shared by most of humanity right now.
Yeah.
So, as a parent, it's like, this is not unusual that your kid has stumbled on something,
Right. And
right?
and nobody, this is worth saying, nobody is exempt from this
Right,
beast coming
right,
into your home.
right.
Nobody is
So
exempt.
helping parents, to take the shame off is like,
Right.
man, you need to reach out to somebody and let them know. And when parents come to me, I always encourage them, do you have leaders and pastors in your life that can help you walk through this?
So
Because
good.
the more you can break the shame of what my son or daughter has seen,
Hmm.
the more equipped you can be by the Holy Spirit to navigate in wisdom. If you isolate and come way over here, like, oh, I don't want anyone to know, then you're just going to be guessing along the
Right.
way. You need people's
Right.
help. And if you have parents in your life who are 5 years ahead of you, they have probably encountered some things and they can probably
Hmm.
help you know how they shut certain doors, what doors they wish they wouldn't open. So
Right.
that's the first thing when it comes to parents really feeling the condemnation. When it comes to kids, it's like they don't know that there are billions of dollars behind that
They have no
screen
idea.
trying
Yeah.
to addict them.
Hmm.
And, if you're ever wondering why the porn industry cares so much about kids, it's because lifelong customers. And right now, we have this
Wow.
very interesting political landscape. I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but
Hmm.
there are states passing laws that basically require explicit sites, which is not like, explicit sites aren't like hiding, like, oh, we don't want people to know we're explicit. They
Yeah.
are advertising it in their metadata. We're explicit. Come watch our porn. Okay. So these sites are very
Just
clearly
dangling the
known.
carrot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So the laws that are being passed are to require age verification, which
Okay.
is highly sophisticated technology now that can
Hmm.
protect privacy.
Hmm.
And this is to protect kids who accidentally stumble on things or who even go looking for something in a moment of weakness and
Right.
then cannot complete the transaction, right? So right now that it's being so resisted by the porn industry that they have hired all of their lobbyists and their lawyers, and it's
I'm
gone all the
sure.
way up to the Supreme Court. Last
Hmm.
week, the Supreme Court heard this case, Paxton versus the what is it called? Free Speech Coalition.
Okay.
Free Speech. That's the
Uh-huh.
name of the lobbyist group. And whatever the Supreme Court decides on that verdict, that will impact a lot of states. It will impact the state of Tennessee because we also passed a law that went into effect January 1st. It was challenged in the courts. And then on the eve of the Supreme Court hearing, we actually got a little bit of a reprieve and our appeal was allowed to reinstate the law, at least temporarily. But I would
Oh,
encourage parents to look at your kids' history because this is a day by day thing in Tennessee. At any point,
mhm.
there could be another challenge to the law and we could lose that protection. But right now,
Okay.
kids are, if they are going onto certain sites, those sites are supposed to have age verification. And
Okay. Okay.
Pornhub.com is supposedly removed itself from all Tennessee IP access. So unless your kid has a VPN to get to it,
Oh,
it's supposedly not accessible from the state of Tennessee. That could
okay.
change, but that's how it is right now. So the porn industry is trying to, with everything they can, to
Of
hold on
course.
to
Hmm.
access to minors. And that's because they know it's highly addictive. They understand how the brain works and they have so much money behind addicting your kids. So the biggest key that I could tell parents is, man, in the younger years, just limit technology as much as you can across the board. Let their brain get really strong. Let their executive function get
Okay.
really strong and grow them spiritually.
Hmm.
Disciple your kids so that when they get to a moment where they encounter something that they either weren't expecting or they found in a moment of weakness,
Right.
the Holy Spirit's voice can kick in and be like, you don't want to do this.
Right.
That's what we need. Our kids have to be resilient and resistant to
Hmm.
the lure because pornography is really looking for them in every nook and cranny of the internet.
Excuse me. So you just said something, be resistance. be resistant and resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And I know anybody who follows me, I've been talking about Gab phones forever. We have 4 kids.
Yeah.
They all started out with Gab phones.
Yep.
Um, and then my oldest went to a flip phone, but I want to be very transparent. We gave our oldest an iPhone at 15,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very delayed in our
Right.
society.
You thought you were doing great, right?
I thought I was doing great, thought we
Yeah.
were doing great. And only to discover, Sarah, and again, I just want to get so transparent. I remember my husband being on customer service with Apple. I know it was over an hour,
Mm-hmm.
locking it down, putting all the parental controls in place. It didn't stop pornography.
No, it can't.
Okay. To that parent, I get this all the time. I get this all the time. Toni, we've locked down the phone.
Right.
You can't get the apps. We've got all the firewalls in place. Talk to us is well, I already know from experience. Talk to that parent who thinks Apple parental controls is going to keep their child from pornography.
Well, I mean, you kind of said it when you said an hour on the phone with Apple customer care. Okay. So a lot of the
Yeah,
problems that you run into on Apple and the help that you seek
yeah,
generally is you're going to a source that it's like they aren't sometimes even parents. They're not even
right,
fully trained on
right,
all of the back doors. And it would ruin their business model if they were, because parents would stop buying iPhones because they would have to be transparent about how many back doors there are. And there's a
right,
number, I mean, the middle school population in America, these are highly networked kids. They know
right.
how to help each other get around stuff. So there is
Oh,
a technical
yes.
component,
Uh-huh.
that you have to, as part of your responsibility as a parent. If
Okay.
there is internet technology in your home, you need to know how to lock the doors you can lock, but you
Okay.
also need to know the doors that you're not going to be able to lock, or the locks that just get broken all the time, which is a big
Okay.
thing with the Apple parental controls. So it's like it still is, you have to do the baseline of safety, and
Okay.
there are layers. So in your home, have a filtered router so that your kids can't get to stuff on your smart TV. Have something
Good.
that
Okay.
shuts all of your devices off at a certain time at night. There are so
Mm-hmm.
many layers that you could put in place. That Wi-Fi layer, you could put things on the device. So if they are old enough for a phone, which I would
Right.
say, 16 to 18, you're training them for adulthood. So you can begin that journey in a very small capacity and
Right.
grow it. Um, but if they have access to a phone, you're going to have to lock down a ton of stuff. And you're going to have really good boundaries in your home where, one of the first things I ask parents when they come to me, is this app safe? Is this app safe? Is like, does your kid have a phone? Do they have a computer? Is the
Mm-hmm.
phone in the bedroom? Does the phone go on a
Right.
school
That's
bus?
right. Mm-hmm.
There are so many nuances to, really adjust the safety of it. But you do need to have layers of technology, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to solve your problem.
Okay.
What you're after is a couple of things that will be the game changers for you. One is finding your partners. So
Okay.
if you can have people in your life who are
Mm-hmm.
walking the same road, who have limited technology in similar ways, it is going to give your kids a sense of normalcy for that, instead of being like, everyone else gets to do this and my stinky parents don't allow me to have whatever. Actually, I was just messaged yesterday by this awesome mom that went to one of our presentations. And she said, afterwards, me and my best friends, we all got together and we started writing down, a
Love it.
pathway, like what could we
Yes.
do for our kids, even to
Mm-hmm.
the point of saying, we're going to agree as a little cohort here on what
Yeah.
kinds of shows they can watch, like by title, so that their kids aren't even saying like, oh, I watch this. And then, well, I don't get to watch it. Like, they're
Right.
like really coming into agreement to try to build that partnership. So for us, we had tons of families who didn't give their kids smartphones and social media. That was super helpful because
That's a game changer.
it is a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond building the partnership, you do need a strategy. So if I was a parent of a kid who was under 6 years old, I would not have any touchscreen devices available to them, not
No,
anywhere.
no.
And I wouldn't have my phone out. I mean, I don't know about you, Toni. I don't know
Yeah,
when you got a smartphone, but my kids were in like the fourth grade when I got
yeah.
my first
It was
smartphone.
a while. It was a while. Yeah.
So when they were little, that was not a struggle for me. I wasn't
Right.
like, oh, I've been on my phone. I shouldn't be. There was no phone to compete with when my kids were young. And now that is a big challenge because as parents are trying to grow their kids with this understanding of, our lives don't rotate around technology, then you have to have a strategy to how do you keep that stuff out of the home environment as much as possible.
Right. And that's a tough one, Sarah. And this, I think this is a great connection point. That is where your ministry comes in. And obviously for time's sake in a podcast, we can't give a ton of information just because we don't have the time.
Right.
But that is where your ministry comes into play. You walk a parent through each of these seasons of life, and you also give them practical application. I mean, hey, I don't mind telling my audience, you poured into my life here recently. We have 4 kids, 19, 15, 13, and 10. And the 13-year-old has a Gab phone. There's
Mm-hmm.
no social media, nothing's on there. The 15-year-old has a Gab phone. There's no social media, nothing on there. But I want to be transparent in saying he had an iPhone. The 15-year-old had an iPhone.
Mm,
And we have Bark and we did the parental controls.
right.
But when I sat across from you, I was so convicted
Mm,
that we made some mistakes with our oldest with technology because let's just face it. Let's be honest. Life is so busy. Um, we're business owners. I'm a homeschool mama, and I
right.
remember the days that Eric was sitting on the phone with customer service with Apple, and most parents, let's just be honest, they're not going to do that.
Right.
They're not going to sit there an hour and a half because he was frustrated, and only to discover that it didn't do any good.
It's not enough.
It's
Right.
not enough.
It's not enough.
And so you convicted me in a good way, not in a condemnation, in a good way of it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I
Yeah.
came home. I talked to my husband. He said the Lord had been talking to him too, even though our 15-year-old son was on lockdown. He said, "Let's take it away." I said, "I'm
Yeah.
in agreement. I'm in
Yeah.
agreement." We gave him the Gab phone. It was a game changer.
Yeah.
And so, I know there's mommies out there and daddies, and I know it's hard. You said something also very powerful. You need a coalition. You
Yes.
need some parents to come alongside of you they've got the same end in mind, because peer pressure is a big thing.
Yeah.
And let's talk about this. In your seminars that you do, you
Hmm.
go to churches,
Hmm.
and you were just at World Outreach Church not too long ago with
Yes.
Pastor Alan Jackson. What would parents expect when they sit through a seminar? What
Well,
what what would they expect? Or not even a seminar, it's a training.
yeah, it really is. It's a training session. That one was unusual because we had 6 sessions
Okay.
to unpack things. So, 6 weeks of training. So it was awesome because we were able
I
to
need 6 weeks of
really
training.
expand it. And I think what parents can expect is, first of all, we're going to give you this continuum of
Okay.
what does the training look like from the moment they're born, and yes, it applies,
It
to
does.
when they're graduating and you're launching them into life.
Okay.
There's something to be gained at every stage as far as things you need to protect and things you need to hold off at every single stage. So
Okay.
we walk families through that, and we really are trying to get churches to step into the ring. And it's
Yes.
like, we don't want to mandate anything in a legalistic way of like, you're not allowed to come to this church if you give your kid a smartphone when
Right.
they're
Right.
10. But why can't pastors stand in the pulpit and say, here's what we know, that our kids are not going to be discipled how they need to be if they have this stuff in their life? It's a discipleship killer. So
So
we want
good.
parents and pastors to really get on the same page with the challenges that we're facing. But we also share so many, very practical things about the tools that are out there, what works and what flaws there are. And then
Hmm.
finally, I think one of the biggest things that parents have, given us feedback like that was so helpful is we have the stories of our two boys, which
Yeah.
two kids, not a scientifically strong sample with two, but
Yeah.
they are our kids, and we do have this church community that we belong to that really walked this way with us. And so when we were at
Oh,
World
that's so
Outreach
good.
and we've kind of carried it on, our youngest son shared about not having a smartphone and social media until way later. And one of the things that it kind of all started when, because our oldest son's super talkative.
Yeah.
He's like going to be in DC in a couple of weeks, meeting with
Oh, that's incredible. Our
he's,
youngest son is talkative.
yeah, he's always been like I comfortable being out front and all that. But our
Love
youngest
it.
son has been a little bit more reserved. But he heard a podcast I was listening to that was
Okay.
talking about how if you don't give your kid a phone by a certain age, they're going to be a social pariah. And my son was like, that is not true. He was so offended. And so he made this video for me that I share in live presentations, live presentation perk only. I don't put it on the internet.
Yeah.
But he's like, he said, if your kid is ashamed of not having a phone or social media, do you think they're going to be unashamed of the gospel? And I'm like, that's so true. So
It is.
from
I
the
mean,
beginning, he's learned how, like, I'm not going to be like everybody else. I'm going to learn how to be uncomfortable around people who are saying you should do this, you should think this. And that was possible not only because of the foundation that he had spiritually, of course,
right,
but because he had all of these friends in his life outside of his school circle that
right,
also didn't have those things. So he had real friendships to anchor his acceptance into. He wasn't trying to get acceptance from all the yahoos at school.
right.
He had real friendships. He has real friendships.
Hmm.
And he is more soberly minded when it comes to evaluating, do I want social media? He's 18 now, and he's like, I probably will get it. We would like him to start for a few months while he's in our home before he goes off to college. But we're like, we're gonna follow your conviction. If you're like, I don't want it yet, we're not
Hmm.
gonna make you get it so that we can train you. If
Right.
if that's your conviction, we're gonna support that. So
Well, it's so interesting, Sarah. There's a lot of people out there that don't do social media for their kids. Um,
mhm,
I just totally forgot of the lady I was thinking of, but there's a lot of celebrities. There's a lot of
mhm,
people in media that don't do social media for their children because, again, going back to the brain. I mean, I'm in my 50s. It's overwhelming for me.
right,
And
right.
I don't think our brain is designed to take in so much information. And here's another term. I think I heard this from you, that there is such a thing. It's kind of trending a little bit in the younger generations is brain rot. Did I get that
Mhm.
from you?
I don't
Did
think
you say
so,
that?
but it's definitely a lot of people are talking about it right
Okay, well,
now.
someone said that to me that they're starting to develop like brain rot.
Right,
Just not here's that word you use, not being sober,
right.
about what's going on because you're constantly picking this up and you're constantly scrolling.
Yes.
Um, you know, and so I think the biggest takeaway from meeting you, uh, learning about this ministry is it's just like, in my homeschool circles, I really don't need someone to tell me exactly what curriculum is right for my child.
Hmm.
But what I do need is I need a support group to say, um, you can do this. You can fight for your kids in a culture that wants to tell you that you're going to ruin your child. You're going to have a bad relationship with them if you
Right,
take all this away.
right.
You really need someone to champion the fact that you're fighting for the hearts and minds of your children. And
Yes.
when I sat with you and talked with you, even though I would have told you very humbly, I thought I was doing a lot of the right things. And I don't think the things we did were in vain.
Right.
Um, but you coming into my life just help me lock another door. And just and honestly too, when they're young, that's such a small fraction of their life, you
Yes.
know, and you cannot get back now that I'm a little bit older mama and we've already launched our oldest one. Um, I have to be careful to give that to the Lord, the mistakes that I
Right.
made, the mistakes
Right.
that we made, and knowing that the Holy Spirit can um, give us back those years that, I mean, honestly, let me just say it. We should have never given him an iPhone at 15.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, so mamas just need encouragement. They need
Yes.
to know that, when you're swimming against the current, it's okay. God is with you. There are people out there that will come alongside of you and fight for you. I love that you have set your sights on coming into churches now
Yeah.
because the pastor holds such a powerful position to disciple families. And I'm
Yes.
I'm a big advocate, yes, we disciple our own families, but the pastor has such a powerful voice and such a powerful influence into his congregants. And when I saw you talking to Pastor Allen, I thought, man, this lady, she's walked through some fires.
Hmm.
She's come out the other side. She loves, she has the heart of the Father. She loves these kids. And I think that makes you a fantastic ambassador to go out there and proclaim these things can be great, but they're stealing a lot of hearts and minds out there.
Yes.
We've got a suicide rate that is off the charts.
Right.
Um, these things are polluting our kids' minds with images that most of our generation, you and me, Sarah, we've never seen these images.
Right. Just hearing the titles of or descriptions of those images
Yes.
would be enough to traumatize some moms. There's some things I can't
I,
unhear or
yes.
things I read about. Yeah.
I, 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 I've sat down with some legislators and I'm like, I don't know if I'm cut out to do that because I don't know if I could look at all that.
Yeah.
Knowing that our children are bombarded with that day in and day out. But again, there is a solution, partnering with the Holy Spirit as a believer of Jesus Christ,
Yes.
but also too, there is practicality. Again, I'm in my 50s. I've been walking with the Lord for a long time. Homeschool mama, homeschool family. My husband's involved. But one encounter sitting with you, I felt like it took me to another level. And why would
That's
we
so
not want to
sweet.
do that?
Yeah. Well, I'll share with you something that the Holy Spirit said to me that put a little bit more fire in me to not abandon, but to shift from just going home to home and PTA group to PTA group. It's like we have got to go a little bit higher to those who are influencing families in the day in and day out,
Okay.
and just really making an impact because the hour is so urgent, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the Holy Spirit said to me one day, there's no internet in heaven. And I've been thinking about that for probably a year and a half now. And I think about the passage in 2 Corinthians 4:18 that talks about, things that are seen are temporal and
Yes.
things that are unseen are eternal. And as Christian parents,
Mm,
we are to be sowing into our kids for eternal fruit in their life, right? But we have this societal mantra, and I've said it too, that the
mm.
internet is forever. So that feels like, oh, that's permanent. The internet is forever. But let's just look at this biblically.
Okay.
The internet is actually temporary.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is one day the internet will shut off permanently and suddenly for every person on the planet, not at the same time, but when you breathe your last breath
That's powerful,
and you
Sarah.
are before the throne of God, it is not
Hmm.
going to matter how many influencers you knew, how many subs you had on YouTube. And
No.
we have these stickers that say the internet, there's no internet in heaven. And when I hand them out to parents, they're like,
I
"That's
gotta
the
have
greatest
that.
news," you
I
know?
have to have that sticker.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a catchy statement, but I
Uh-huh.
always ask the kids because
And
when
it's
we do
true.
like homeschool conventions or whatever, there's always kids and they're coming up to our table, and I try to make sure everything's appropriate for kids. And they always want to pick up that sticker, and we'll give them one for free. And I say, "Do you know what that means?" And they really think about it, and
Uh-huh.
it's really hard for them to wrap their brain around. So it's a great conversation for
I
parents
bet.
to talk to their kids about what we want to give you is something that you're taking with you when your life is over. What
Yes.
you are taking with you is your spirit.
That's right.
And that's where we want to focus our attention and our discipleship is on building your spirit, man. And
Right.
everything that's in your hands is going to go away. I have a box. I take it to schools when I have school opportunities. I have a box of technology that is no more. It's
Right.
obsolete.
It's ever changing. It's
Yes,
ever,
and
and
it's all the stuff that at one point it was like, oh my
that
gosh,
was the
I got
hottest
a
thing. You had to have
slide phone.
it.
Right.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like your generation is
I,
going to have that too. The very thing in your hands, the iPhone, whatever that
right.
you think is so amazing, one day that's going to be in a landfill.
Yes.
Like that is not it's and so why, when you look at Jesus's words about, what would you trade? Like, are you going
Mhm.
to give your soul away to gain the whole world? Does that work?
Girl, you are speaking my language. Oh my goodness. You're so gifted for this hour, Sarah. You
Thank
are so
you.
gifted for this hour. And you're right. We have to cast that vision onto our kids. Because their vision is so limited in
Yeah,
that season of their life. And they think they're gonna live forever and they don't understand the vastness of eternity, but
right.
casting that vision onto them that the internet will come to an end.
Yeah,
You will draw your last breath.
yeah.
And so let me ask you this. How I have two questions for you. What is pressing on your heart right now to tell a parent um, who is thinking, let's say they're thinking about giving their iPhone to their child
Hmm.
at a young age of, let's say, elementary school. What
Okay.
what would you say to them?
I would say that it's unless there is a severe custody situation where the
Okay.
safety of your child is in jeopardy.
Okay.
I don't think you need to give them an iPhone. I think there's plenty of kid safe options that would facilitate communication, safety, location. That is a real scenario. I mean,
Right.
we have known people who have had to put their kids on an airplane as an unaccompanied minor to fly to another state to have Christmas with the ex. Okay, so
Okay.
I get it. There
Okay.
are situations, but outside of those extreme environments, there is literally, it's indefensible when it comes to the research. We know how this is impacting kids.
Right.
And you really can't defend it from a biblical point of view, also, because, we look at what scripture says about all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. Not
Right.
all things edify. That's in
Hmm.
First Corinthians 10. It's
Right.
like edify means build up. Is that phone going to build up your child, or is that phone going to tear your child down? I mean, there's literally no evidence that that is going to help your kid. And if you have an extreme situation,
Okay.
I would even say the iPhone's not going to be the best because it's not kid safe. So you're adding more risk onto that. There are other things that can help you accomplish what is
Excellent.
needed for safety that are not in the Apple world at all,
Hmm.
that have been created by people with kid safety in mind. So I would lovingly just be like, you're wrong.
I don't think it's a good choice.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't defend it after 10 years, seeing what I've seen.
Yeah.
I just can't defend it.
That's so good. Well, our 15-year-old, he's on a mission trip, his very first one.
Yeah, it's
A lot of
exciting.
prayer, fasting, and waiting went into that.
Yeah.
But he's in Nicaragua
Yeah.
with his Gab phone. And I'm happy to report he's got great service. I've talked to him.
That's
Come
wild.
on now.
Wow.
That's, I mean,
We had the
that's
very first Gab phone because of the age of my younger son.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would have covered Nicaragua.
Yeah.
But anyway, they've kept
Well,
improving
he
it.
he has the Gab 4, the Pro 4
Oh, nice.
phone. And
Nice.
so there's internet access on that, but there's no browser.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I can put the apps on there for him for school,
Great.
but it's not an iPhone.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to report he had service in Nicaragua.
That's so
Go
wild.
figure. Um, so, but I do know there's a day coming, 17, 18. Um, what would you advise that parent?
Yeah.
They do have an iPhone. They're giving their child an iPhone.
Hmm.
Um, but of course, now their brain is more developed. There's been
Right.
more time for discipleship.
Yeah.
Um, what are some other parameters? I know we talked about, not to take away from what you're about to say, but bark and covenant eyes. And
Hmm.
how would you navigate that parent with a teenager about 17, 18 years old?
Yeah. I think Bark is a tool that can be used if a parent understands what it's going to help with and what it can't do. You just can't go
Okay.
into it thinking this is going to solve all of your problems. But
Oh, that's
again, for
good.
certain at risk situations, if you have a kid who is like, they've got kids in their life who are talking to them about drugs or whatever, like,
Okay.
yeah, maybe you need like a massive amount of notifications. But I can tell you what our experience has been with our two kids between 16 and 18. It's like
Okay.
starting to layer in. And if you could picture, I actually have a great video that I show at our workshops of a kid who looks like maybe he's 110 pounds and he's
Okay.
starting to learn how to deadlift and he
Yeah.
films himself over a year. And
Okay.
by the end, he has so much weight on either side. You can see his neck muscles have grown. Like this kid, look, so if you can picture the progression, it's like you cannot go from nothing to, deadlifting 300 pounds. You
Okay.
have to start stacking on some weight. So giving them a smartphone that you have just a few basic things on, don't
Okay.
add games or anything like that yet. You're stacking it in. And then it's really like utilitarian,
Yeah.
Once they're, 17, 18, it's like they might be working a job where they have to have a certain app. They might be driving. Hopefully they're driving. Even colleges, when we would go tour colleges, there were some colleges that had an app that you would download and it would provide like information along the tour. So
Okay.
these are things out of adulthood that we want them to learn how to use, because if they do go off to college or to boot camp or any other thing where they're outside of your home, they're probably going to be sleeping with that device in their room,
Mm,
and they're going to be, downloading and navigating whatever. So I think it's really important to stack that weight. And then for us, one of the parenting models, so to speak,
mm.
that we have really ascribed to is this book. And there's a podcast called Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. And it's
Oh, that sounds
all
good.
about like stair stepping your kids to that eventual freedom. And
Okay.
so one of the things that they help you do, they provide structure on really laying out a freedoms list for your kid. Like,
Okay.
here are the freedoms that at your age we're like, yeah, like you can keep your room however you want.
Okay.
Scary. You
That
can
is scary.
you can have the haircut you want. You start to go into, you can listen to the music you want. Like
Okay.
but here are the responsibilities that go with that. So it's a shift from childhood where you're preaching obedience
Right.
and you're starting to lay the expectation of responsibility, right?
That's
So
so
it's like,
good.
here are your
Mm-hmm.
freedoms. And they talk about the teenager being this sovereign nation that is occupied by your troops, and you're removing your troops one territory at a time. And
Okay.
technology is really the last territory that you withdraw from. So for us,
Okay.
we really ascribe to that. So you have to be 18 and graduated from high school to sleep with any device in your room. And we don't recommend it, but
Right.
we're going to give you that summer before you go off to college to really see how you do and to get a feel for, I can't have this too close. I need a shut off, because if they go off, you won't have control over those things. You
Right.
have to give them time to practice. And our oldest son was like, he thought he won the lottery. He got his computer and his phone in his room, and he was like, I'm going to be fine. And then he was like, oh my gosh, this is really hard, because his
Yeah.
whole life we had really had that expectation of devices charged downstairs. And so when he went off to college, he was in a one room suite, and he had to figure out, how do I protect myself
Right.
in this environment? Whether that's getting an alarm clock, or, charging your phone. He was on
Hmm.
a bunk bed, like so far away that you can't reach it. Whatever it is, it's like we need to help our kids start to develop some of these soft skills of
Hmm.
refusing the technology in their life on purpose,
Well,
and talking with kids so they can support each other in that.
absolutely. Well, one thing that my husband always says to the kids is accountability should never leave you.
Yes. Yep.
And just because you're an adult, because this is what he says to our children, mom and dad are accountable to each other. Here's
Yes.
the big one. You'll always be accountable to God.
Yes. Yeah.
And so accountability is not something that all of a sudden you're 18, 19 and hey,
Right.
I'm free.
You don't age out of it. And that's why we
You
do
don't
love
age out of
Covenant
it. I
Eyes.
love that.
Covenant
Hmm.
Eyes is great for college students because,
Yes.
Bark's not going to work after they're 18.
Right.
And nor do you want to send that signal to your kid unless, again, they are high risk. Like we had an 18-year-old in junior year. Okay.
Okay.
So there were some things we still had bark notifications on. He wasn't high
Sure.
risk, but so it's like there are some things, but you don't want to communicate to your kid, you can't handle this when you're an adult. So we
Okay. See,
want you to
I
know
love
what you
that.
can handle, what
Hmm.
you need help with. I mean, our
Right.
whole family's on Covenant Eyes. We see each other's reports.
Yes.
And it's a great tool for college because it's not something that's tied to, you're a child, so I need to watch you. It's like, this is accountability in the internet age. Our whole family's on it. And so we all use it. And it went
Yeah.
with him to college, and it's been fabulous. So that's one that I would really encourage parents who are looking at that launch. Like
Hmm.
Covenant Eyes is really in a class of its own because
It
it's
is.
not parental controls for children. It's
Hmm.
accountability and filtering software for anyone of any age.
Well, my husband has it, and my oldest son has it. And again, I don't, like you said, you never age out of
Yeah.
accountability.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you this. I really would love to see your ministry in more churches, especially across Middle Tennessee. And again, the only way that I knew that you even existed, Sarah, was I saw you on Christian Culture and Christian with Alan Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is it. Why are we not hearing more about this in churches? Because I'll tell you that, yeah, mommies have struggles, but this technology thing, it kicks our butts.
Yeah.
It does.
Most
I'm
people.
not going to hold anything back. Just when you think you have figured something out, along comes something else.
Right.
And but and then another thing too is just when a mama feels um equipped with knowledge and confidence. She's like, I can do this, even if all the rest of you are doing iPhones and you've given all these apps to your kids. But you know what? I can do this. I can
Right.
walk alone if I need to, or maybe I can take a couple other mommies with me. And I believe that's what your ministry does is you so gracefully, gently but firmly come in and want to equip these parents because it is no joke.
Yeah.
This pornography, the suicide rates in these children,
Right.
not teens, children.
Right. Right.
Um, I mean, I could go on and on, but a lot of it, if not most of it, is coming off of the internet, and we've just given them these devices. And so, with that said, how can a pastor or youth pastors get a hold of you, bring you in? First of all, how can they get a hold of you? And what does that look like for you to come in and educate and train a congregation?
Yeah. So we have a website, parentswhofight.com. We have a couple of
Okay.
social media profiles at Parents Who Fight.
Okay.
I generally am trying to stay as current as possible as far as like trends on
Yeah.
technology or legislation on Instagram.
Yeah.
That is not, some people will say, oh, that feels hypocritical. No, because I'm an adult.
Right.
So that's why we're like, it's not great for teenagers, but adults, if you can use it for the kingdom, you have boundaries, by all means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way you can reach out to me.
Okay.
I think when it comes to equipping congregations, we're looking at a couple of different ways. So, of
Okay.
course, we want to equip the parents within the congregation, but we're also starting to get more and more focused on equipping the leadership to have a culture in their church that is very
Okay.
intentional
This is
about
good.
technology. So that
Okay.
could be, what kind of a tech policy does your church even have? I know for a lot of youth groups, they are thinking about things, and like our youth group has a tech-free camp and tech-free services, but because of
I
how,
think that's unusual though.
well,
That's
it's not as much as it used to be
okay.
because of the phone free schools movement. The phone
Okay.
free schools movement in the last 12 months
Okay.
has exponentially impacted society. And so now it's like, so are we going to let the schools be ahead of the church? So the
Oh,
schools know that it's distracting the kids, but
you
the
just
church
said
is
something
like,
pretty
we're
good right
fine.
there. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
So I think
Mm-hmm.
that has really opened the conversation, right? But
Okay.
in addition to the youth service stuff, it's like your example, if a 10-year-old has an iPhone, well, that 10-year-old's in kids ministry. Does your
Right.
kids ministry have a strategy, not just for, keeping the phones out of the kids ministry setting? Is your kids ministry actively engaging parents on these issues?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just like, I wrote this whole resource, it's available on our website, about kids ministries preparing families to protect against pornography.
Oh,
That
I
is not
love that.
because the kids minister is talking to the children.
Mm-hmm.
That is pastor to parent communication. Because if
Okay.
a parent encounters that their kid has been exposed, and the kids pastor has already said, hey parents, just so you know, this is a threat. If it happens to your kid, come talk to us, we have resources to help you. Then the
Mm-hmm.
parent automatically knows that pastor is safe to talk to about it. I don't need to be ashamed. That pastor already told me this is so common. That's why we all need to get on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
So now the kids pastor has paved a channel of communication for the parents to come and say, oh yeah, my kid does want to play Fortnite, and now they're, what do I do? And then the kids pastor can be like, hey, we have resources for you. Here's Parents Who Fight, here's other ministries they
Wow.
recommend,
That's
here's the
so good.
recommended reading. So there are lots of ways that the leadership in
Mm-hmm.
churches can change the game, and that's what we want to see. Because if you get a few parents on board in each church, like, that's good, it's better than nothing. Is that going to shape a generation? When it comes to churches, the leaders of the generations are equipping families on all kinds of things, especially things related to discipleship. And we would state that technology is intricately tied up in that,
Right.
because
Right.
Jesus said that if there's a branch that doesn't bear fruit, then the Lord will take it away. And if there's a branch that is bearing fruit, He will prune it. So He's going to keep coming after these things, because we glorify Him when we bear much fruit. So if you
Mm-hmm.
look at the kids in your congregation, are they as fruitful as they could be if they weren't addicted to technology, if they weren't distracted, if they spent more time in the Word each day than social media? Would that be fruitful? I think it would be. So it's like, let's keep going after it. And there's a lot of churches right now doing digital fasts. Our church is getting ready to do a media fast. So there's an awareness out there, and we just need more people to jump in and say, we're going to take a stand. We're going to unify the parents in our church, because this is a discipleship issue, and we need to help our kids learn how to walk fully after Jesus, to follow Him
Mm-hmm.
and deny themselves and take up their cross. Like, that's what's needed for this generation. So we need pastors and ministry leaders to come into the fight.